Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, you know that saying where if you don't know history or if you ignore it, you're doomed to repeat it? Because the Rangers did this with Henrik Lundqvist's entire career, learned nothing, and are running it back with Shesterkin and with Jonathan Quick.
Hey man, you respect Stan Fischler's 2025 number one goalie Jonathan Quick, who I mean I don't want to relitigate the entire 50-minute episode of last week,
Yeah.
but we watched the team long enough. I know how this goes.
Yep.
Shesterkin will be a top 3 in the Vezina. They'll give Laviolette Coach of the Year buzz because they had a great goalie. Fox probably be top 4, top 5 for the Norris. You might get outside heart stuff for Panarin, and on paper everything looks fine. You know, I made the allusion before we started recording to the Cowboys, and they've, up until this year, the 1 year Dak broke his leg, but for the most part, consistent playoff team, win between 10 and 13 games every year, beat up on bad competition, lose to good competition. You're never going to convince the GM and owner, who are the same person in that case, that there's something wrong here. Well, we just got to get in the playoffs, and we get there enough times, things are going to break our way eventually. And that's not to say the Rangers can't get things to break their way. I mean, it happens. Teams do win the Stanley Cup by accident. The St. Louis Blues shouldn't have won the Stanley Cup. I could argue the Washington Capitals should not have won that Stanley Cup. It happens. But staking a multi-year period of your franchise on we're the 5th or 6th best team. We have 4 players who are in the argument for best player in the world at their position. And we think that's good enough where even if it's 55-45 going into the series on paper, we feel our elite talent is enough to make it to 50-50, and we'll take that bet. I mean, you recall what Sam said when we had him on, where he was talking how Adam Fox held up his finger just to say that's how close we were to beating Florida, even though they lost in 6 games and went multiple games scoring 1 or 2 goals in those games. So it's not just a organization. It's not just a organization in terms of front office. The players think they're right there too. And we talked about this a lot 2 years ago. The idea that you think you're close is dangerous. You know, there's this prevailing sentiment amongst people I talk to in our age group that you never talk about anything you're excited about because you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to ruin it, whether it's a job opportunity, a relationship, moving out, getting a new place. You never mention it until it's finalized because you don't want to tempt fate. And right now, the Rangers are too good for me to say, well, they're tempting fate playing like this and the season's too young. But we did this 2 years ago. It got the coach fired, and no one really learned any lessons because all we did was bring in Blake Wheeler, Jonathan Quick, and Eric Gustafson. We didn't learn any big lessons. And as much as everybody wants to say, well, all they got to do is get there, yeah, it's great that they're going to keep winning 45 to 52 regular season games. It is. The Rangers are amongst the most successful regular season teams over the last 15 years. They are, statistically. They were the team last decade with the second most playoff series wins of anyone who didn't win the Stanley Cup. The Sharks won more playoff series last decade. They are amongst the most consistent regular season teams. They have an incredible valuation. They play in the most expensive building in the second most expensive building in the United States, third most in the entire league. Everything on paper here is great. But when you watch the games, you notice the little things. And I know the prevailing sentiment after the Buffalo game was they didn't have energy, they looked lethargic. The counterpoint, and the reason I disagree with that assessment, go back and watch the tape. It is blind passes to nobody. It is forwards leaving the zone before the defenders have even recovered the puck. It is stretch passing 110 feet as opposed to trying to make the first pass that's 30 feet. It is not coming back on the back check. It is floating through the neutral zone. It is the little things. It is the details. And look, that game gets away from you and it happens. You know, you play a team with skill. I know Buffalo doesn't have a great record, but they are a talented team. You know, Dahlin is a good player. Power is a good player. Cousins, Thompson, they have talent where if you mess up,
they lost a stinker to Montreal today, though.
Yes, but that's the point.
Yeah.
The Rangers take advantage of bad teams making mistakes all the time. They do. That is how they pad their win total. You know, they do not have a great track record against great teams in the regular season. Those games usually end up being coin flips because of the nature of how the Rangers like to play. But on paper, everything's fine. But if you watch, if you are observant, if you are looking away from the puck, if you are looking at transition, it is clunky. It is disjointed, and it is a lot of guys trying to make individual plays outside of structure. That works if you're Artemi Panarin. That does not work if you're Ryan Lindgren.
Yeah.
Ryan Lindgren should not be trying to backhand rim a pass blindly up the half wall 20 seconds into the game. He doesn't get the puck cleanly because he loses the race. He says, all right, I got to move this puck. I got to move this puck. And he blindly sends it on his backhand, so it's not a hard pass. There's no forward on that right side because they were all deep, because the ensuing possession before the Rangers were in deep, they had three forwards below the circles in the Buffalo offensive zone. So there's no one there to get that pass to. But Lindgren, sensing I got to move this puck, just sends it to anyone. Could be anyone.
I was texting back and forth a few days ago with somebody who works in, hockey media, and I asked him the question of, why, when asked the question of why X player is playing over Y player, when the coach says, "Oh, because they work hard and all these things," why then is the follow-up question not asked about what specifically that player is doing that the player being taken out is not? The word salad that coaches and a lot of analysts like to throw out of, oh, this guy's been around and he plays hard, has bite. I'm doing a lot of air quotes for people that are listening and not watching, that are, that play hard and that they're warriors and that they're glue guys and they eat minutes and all these things. None of that actually tells me why you are preferring player A over player B. That tells me zero. All that does is you're giving me a bunch of words in the dictionary that vaguely all are supposed to tell me and paint me a picture of why you prefer this player, but you are giving me absolutely zero context and zero information about what player A is doing that you personally like seeing during game time that player B is not doing. And again, we mentioned this last week, and I want to bring this up again. The Ryan Lindgren actively is not making this team better right now. He's not.
Ryan Lindgren's not one of their six best defensemen right now.
No,
Mancini is
he's
terrible.
right.
He's not better
Yes.
than Mancini right now.
Mancini hasn't been good. The thing about Mancini is that he's a puck carrier and he's a puck mover. So he's at least, not bad in the sense of he can get the puck from point A to point B. And in the offensive zone, he can actually make things, in ethereally happen. Whereas players like Ryan Lindgren can't do that because he treats like a hot potato. But like, Mancini hasn't been good defensively. And even then, I think I'd prefer Mancini right now to Ryan Lindgren, because at least Mancini can do things with the puck. He's not terrified to move it and shoot it, when he finds an opportunity to do so. What has Ryan Lindgren done this season that has given him the right or the opportunity, or whatever word that you want to use to describe it, ice time over somebody like Mancini? Objectively, I understand. He's a warrior. He's a nice guy. He's been here before. He's not a rookie. That I understand. If you want to argue that, that's one thing. On the ice, when Ryan Lindgren is on the ice, what is he doing that, one, Mancini isn't, and two, is better than Zach Jones whenever that, because they're in that little three-man rotation? What is Ryan Lindgren doing that Zach Jones isn't doing? What is Ryan Lindgren doing that, I don't know, Ben Harper isn't doing? I know he's suspended right now because he ran over a goalie for some reason. That was a strange decision on his part. But like, what is Ryan Lindgren doing right now that a replacement or somebody else in the lineup isn't doing? I want that answered by Peter.
Well, don't go telling that certain reporter who works for that certain publication how to do his job, because he gets very upset when he gets asked, how come you didn't ask this question? Well, because you asked a question which prompted a follow-up question,
right,
and you let it stand. It is a entire non sequitur with this organization to get any meaningful information. And it's difficult because I want to take them at their word that they're trying to ice the best lineup possible. I know there's a little bit of like palace intrigue right now about, well, is Laviolette icing the roster the way Drury just set it up? Well, at a certain point, the general manager can make things happen. If he wants the roster deployed in a certain way, He can make transactions. He can send guys to the AHL. That's why they sent Chad Ruedel down, was because they
Right.
knew Lindgren was coming
What
back.
is Ryan Lindgren doing that Chad Ruedel can't do?
The Rangers were
I
getting their
would love
best.
the answer to that. Like an
The
objective answer would be nice. Like, but again, more than just he's a warrior. He's been here tangibly on the ice when he's playing the game. What is Ryan Lindgren doing that Chad Ruedel either isn't or can't? Someone please explain this to me because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
It's a real weird situation because this is one of those times where we all have to like nod like we're at a party and a kid like a 7-year-old's trying to tell us a story and it makes no sense at all, but they're putting a lot of effort into telling the story to us. So we got to nod and be like, "Wow, that's crazy. Ryan Lindgren played with a broken leg last year. That's awesome. Oh, he's played with a broken ankle before. That's so cool. Oh, he was friends with Adam Fox when they were both in the National Development Team program. No way."
Yeah.
That's the way we have to take these anecdotes because we know they're not based in reality. I'm going to pull up this spreadsheet. This is just the goalies. Excuse me. This is just the defensive results by pairs based on ice time. So let me make sure it's sized up. Yeah, okay. When you're looking at this, all the two pairs that Lindgren has played in, the goal splits are bad. The goal splits are objectively bad. But the thing that's galling about this is they found a good pair that worked.
They sure
When
did.
when you look at that first pair, you got great results. You were outscoring opposition 7-5. You were generating 67% of the expected goals, 65% of the high danger chances, and you were doing that with 902 goaltending, which means in theory, if you got slightly better goaltending, which you should because you would expect that line to be out there with the Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line, at least when it was constituted together, which tells you that, well, they were out there, but they were conceding a lot of chances against because of the nature of the forwards they were playing with. It goes back and forth, up and down, but we're winning those minutes and we're controlling play. We're giving up a lot on the counter, but that makes sense based on our talent. Then when you go and look at the pairs since then, when you look at what you've gotten from Trouba Miller, 38-78 in scoring chances against,
Yeah.
0-4 in goals against, 4-17 in high danger chances for and against. The shooting percentage is supposed to be 10, not 0, but 897 save percentage. So you're making Igor or Quick work their ass off. You're getting 890 goaltending. Why are we doing this? Trouba and Lindgren, same deal. 37% of the scoring chances, 42% of the expected goals, 50% of the goals, but that's because it's 1-1, 6-4 high danger, and then 964 save percentage to induce those results in those minutes. This is not a case of, well, maybe we're not seeing something. No, it is as bad as it looks. When you watch Trouba and Miller play with each other, there is no feel. They have
Zero.
I think it is the third or fourth most minutes of any two defensemen together over the last 3.5 seasons. One of the most commonly deployed pairs in the entire NHL. You have 3 years of playoff runs of data to say when you put them out there against quality competition, they struggle. And people will say, well, they play with Zibanejad. They play with the third line. How do you expect them to drive possession? I'm not asking them to drive possession. I am asking them to be within 5% of even. If you're at 45% at playing against good competition without the best forwards, that's fine. You can't be 30%. You can't be 42%. You are getting run off the ice when you are out there and the other team is generating 58, 59% of the scoring chances. It is entirely nonsensical. And look, there needs to be a more thorough team commitment to defense. I saw people talking about that after the Detroit game. You're right. The forwards are not doing their job defensively. That's 100% fair.
Yep.
But because the forwards are a lot more finite, there is not another clear-cut option to bring in that is going to induce better defensive results. And don't tell me it's going to be Matt Rempe or Brett Berard or Brennan Othman that is going to help the forwards play better defense.
Right.
None of those three guys' profiles is the type of forward you would need. You would effectively need to drop another Kakko or somebody with a Valerie Nichushkin type skill set of shot suppression and managing to control the puck. Those types of guys are not in abundance in the NHL. It is a weird and unique skill set because forwards now know points are what get me paid. If I have an elite 200-foot game, my salary caps out at $4.5 million per year. If I put up 70 points, I can make $11 or $12 million a year. That's the reality of the game and where we're at in the NHL. So don't tell me there's no obvious solution, at least on defense. Forwards, yeah. Forwards is a lot more of a complicated subject because you have to talk about how they play off of each other and the simple fact that you can't really get Zibanejad going right now. But on defense, you had 10 games of evidence that, well, these are pairs are working. And look, I understand that the Jones Mancini pair wasn't great, but you had two pairs working.
Yeah.
Schneider Truba and Fox Miller were working,
Yeah.
objectively working. And I understand not wanting to punt, 14, 15 minutes a game. But when the option is we punt or struggle in 15 minutes per game, or we struggle in 40 minutes per game, I do not
Sure.
understand the difference. I do not understand this decision making. It is infuriating.
I tweeted this out earlier today, and I said objectively, and I'll just read what I said. I said objectively remains baffling to me that now three separate head coaches, right? David Quinn, Gerard Gallant, and now Peter Laviolette, went Miller Truba is great. They play well together and have kept them together despite literal years of not just like stats. Sure, we've been saying that for a long time about not just us, but people that are analytically inclined. They've been showing how disastrous that pair has been.
Okay, let me
But
addendum. Regular
sure,
season, the results are reasonable. In the playoffs,
that's
they are disastrous.
right.
That is an
Okay,
important
okay,
distinction to
but
make.
even if that's the case, you have years of film at this point where you can see with your own eyes, even if you throw analytics out the window, if you're one of those people that are like, analytics don't tell you anything, they're trash, eye test is all that matters. Okay, watch them two play together. They can't understand where the other person is 70% of the time. They don't know what the correct outlet pass is. They lose their man a lot. They are a disaster in their own zone. We have years of evidence to show this. Why now, still to this day, like that? This is what's more baffling to me is like, okay, if you try out a pair and it doesn't work and you try something else, okay, that's totally fine. This has been a pair for years now under three separate head coaches. So that's the most baffling thing to me is what do you watch in these film sessions? If that is one of your most glaring defensive issues, and it's noticeable most games. If you want to say not all games, most games, fine, I'll give you that. In most games, Truba Miller have had issues. Let's just say that. And yet they continue to be together because of reasons, because they're comfortable with each other, because I can't even fathom a third option in this scenario. Objectively, that pair is not good on the ice. The fact that it is now the third different head coach that has said, yeah, just play together. It's fine. They'll figure it out. It's okay. And the results are still bad. And there is nothing good that can be gleamed from it is, it's baffling to say the least. Like eventually when you watch them play, like if we're not in the film room, we watch the games, we dissect the games, like we might even go back and rewatch some of these plays, and it is so blatantly obvious that Truba and Miller do not work well together as a pairing, and we're not in there. We don't have a whole fleet of assistant coaches and video coaches there to break this stuff down. We see it. How do they not see it? It's been three separate head coaches now, and they've all reverted to the same thing. And like you mentioned, they found good pairs. If you want to say Mancini Jones wasn't great, okay, but then at least give him a little bit of runway, see if it doesn't work, maybe bring up Rubio, maybe do something else, and then just hold until March. Hold until the deadline. They can find a fifth defenseman and work from there. But to go back to what you know doesn't work because of I don't even know why. And now you're getting dumped. Like, again, I tweeted this when they were playing Detroit. It's like, if you're getting lapped at 5-on-5 against teams like Buffalo, which, they're a talented team. I won't argue that. Or Detroit, if you're getting lapped at 5-on-5 against those two teams, what exactly do you think is going to happen in the playoffs when they have to play Florida again, when they have to play Carolina or New Jersey or whichever insert team you want here? What do you think is going to happen then? That's what I would love to ask, the people that still hold true to those, defensive pairings and all that, everything that's going on. Because, some people still think, oh, this is a blip. They'll figure it out. It's fine. Oh, really? I guess we've really learned nothing over the past 3-4 years.
So I have their stats for the last 3 years, not this year because we've only played, 12, 13 games. Over the last, from 2021 until the end of last regular season, 49.46 scoring chances, 50.35 goals for, 48.6 expected goals for, 48.8 high danger chances for. That's with 865 shooting and 915 saves. So slightly above average goaltending, slightly below average shooting, and they're basically a wash in the regular season. But when I toggle on the playoff filter and this webpage loads, once it loads, come on, there we go. Okay. In the playoffs, they have 540 minutes together. The scoring chances are 44.89%, 50% goals, 18 for, 18 against. The expected goals for is 39.15%. The high danger chances for is 38.47%. They are giving up extreme quality against good competition. They are playing overall. The totals are a little, they're pretty even. But when you do the quantity versus quality, and you start to understand, well, if Trouba and Miller are out there against the other team's best players, and they are getting 58, 59% of the scoring chances against them, when Zibanejad, who is supposed to be a great defensive center, is out there,
Allegedly.
at a certain point, you feel like you're wasting your time, because why am I getting this mad about this when the coaches, we'll figure it out. When the players, well, I'm not that worried. Molly tweeted, they're blaring Eye of the Tiger in the locker room after they beat Detroit. You
Yeah.
should not feel good about beating Detroit. Beating Detroit should
Yeah.
be another day at the
And
office.
they
That
they kind of lost because Detroit couldn't hit the net.
Okay, I
Like
wouldn't
they
say that. Look, goalie's part of the team.
No, no,
Goalie is
no.
part of
What
the
what
team.
what I, what I'm Quick played a great game. I'm not
Yes.
saying anything about Quick. They hit like 3 posts. They had like wide open nets that they just whiffed on. Like Quick made incredible saves, and I'll give him a lot of credit for the reason the Rangers won that game. However, also to that point, the Rangers still would have lost the game if Detroit hit the net instead of hitting posts or just whiffing.
You're not wrong. I don't disagree with you, but I know that this has effectively become, one of those third rail issues where, well, the goalie's part of the team. So if they give up a bunch of chances and the goalie plays well, why are you knocking them? Because in a short playoff series, that is not a tenable solution, especially when you're going to be shorthanded. And I don't mean literally shorthanded. I mean it in the sense that at some point, you're probably going to play a team that's better than you. And to close the gap against a team that's better than you need everything. It can't just be the goalie. You have seen the limitations of that two separate times now in the Shesterkin era, where they have played a team that is better than them. And I know people will say, well, they were close with Florida than they were with Tampa Bay. Sure, they played Florida better than they did Tampa Bay 3 years ago now. That's fine. But if you're going to close that gap, you need to convince me that you understand that gap exists. Because everything about this, from the way the GM is managing the roster, to the way the coach is deploying the lineup, to who's playing with who, to the minutes they get, the special teams assignments, everyone is trying to tell me that this is fine. This is not quite the 5-on-5 play it was the first year of Gallant, where Shesterkin won the Vezina and had one of the best goalie seasons of all time. But this is a lot closer to that than what it was last year. Last year, they were right around 50% in all the metrics during the regular season. They weren't amazing at 5-on-5, but by the Rangers standard, they were above what the Rangers typically are. And you saw how good the results were. The Rangers played close to even at 5-on-5, and they won the President's Trophy. I'm not saying they need to be a dominant team. I'm not saying they need to be the Canes. I'm not saying they need to play like the Oilers in terms of possession, but they got to be better than this if they want to be taken seriously. There is a gap. I mean, they're sitting in third in the Metro. I think they might be in one of the wild card spots, but Carolina is ahead of them right now. Carolina hasn't missed a beat, and Carolina doesn't worry
Despite
me.
getting worse on paper, by the way.
Oh yeah, significantly worse on paper. They lost 3 of their 6 defensemen. They lost Gensel. They are definitely a worse team talent wise, but they haven't really missed a beat. And at some point, the Rangers are going to end up with a situation where they're going to have to make a determination about what this roster actually needs. I was genuinely happy and impressed to see Peter Boss say in his column, I think it was yesterday, it might have been Saturday, the Rangers probably need a defenseman at the deadline. And acknowledging that, someone that's not us acknowledging that the Rangers definitely need another defenseman, it was
Yeah.
like, I'm not crazy.
Breaking news.
For 3 years now, you and I have been saying, well, it feels like they probably need a defenseman. They're going to go get a forward, but they're going to go get a forward, if not
Yep.
two. But we could probably use another defenseman who's capable of moving the puck at some point. But at a certain point,
What do we know? You know, like it's a very clear cut example of like we've been writing this in our in our
canon and our lore.
yeah, I guess in our that's kind of one of the words I'm looking for is like, you know, we've been fucking getting the bell, and we've been walking around town square being like, hey guys, by the way, you might want to get another defenseman because the guys that you have right now, they're not very good. And you know, like I would assume a lot of people back in those days did with town criers is they ignored them. And that's kind of what's going on right now. Is there's a lot of us and you know people like us saying, "Hey, you might want to fix this little problem you got going on because it won't just magically go away come the playoffs." So finally, after years of us saying the same thing, for somebody finally to be like, "Hey, you know, maybe the Rangers do need another defenseman." It's great. It's you know, it's a step in the right direction of okay. Well, one of the problems is sort of, I guess, being addressed by people, you know, by those in the media. Now it's up to, you know, Christopher and the rest of the gallantry to figure it out, because if they don't, if they get, you know, insert seventh defenseman here to back up the six that are currently here, they're not going anywhere again.
I will say Ryan Lindgren's doing them a huge favor playing this bad because it's not making the decision difficult as to whether or not he's going to stay. Because look, if the Rangers look you in the face and tell you based on the last year and a half that Ryan Lindgren's going to get better, we know they're full of it, and we know we don't have to take their decision seriously anymore. You know, because at a certain point, you get decisions to make.
Yep.
I wrote 3,500 words 3 years ago that extending Zibanejad is going to define Drury's tenure because he's going to be the most influential and fulcrum point in your roster construction because of the term you signed him to and when you signed him to that deal and with the opportunities that were out there. And look, I know there is someone who's listening to this right now who's saying, well, even if they don't win this year, they're going to re-rack, and then 2 years from now, they can try and go after McDavid or Jack Eichel. Look, if they get Jack Eichel 5 years after they should have gotten Jack Eichel, I think there would be no better encapsulation of the New York Rangers of the 21st century that we could have gotten this guy
Yep.
5 years ago if we overpaid. But we wanted to hold on to our prospects. We wanted to hold on to our draft picks. And if you believe Larry Brooks, he still says the Rangers think Zibanejad was and is better than Eichel, which, again, if the Rangers are telling you they think Zibanejad is better than Eichel, they are not to be taken seriously or they are lying. It's one of those two things. So no matter what, it's not great. Either we're being lied to or the people in charge are very dumb. It is one of those two outcomes. You know, being lied to, I can accept. That's part of being a fan. Your team doesn't want to tell you the honest truth because they can't go upset the casual fan, because if the casual fan stops coming, the casual fan stops watching, then, you know, they have issues. But I just,
Of all the teams that can afford to do that, the Rangers could afford to do that because the fans will come anyway. People will still buy tickets. When the Rangers were awful a few years ago, MSG was still packed
yeah, people
because
care.
because the Rangers, you know, are the Rangers and people will still come to watch the Rangers no matter what, but also because they were honest about them being terrible. The Rangers put out that uh you know
Letter, yeah.
the letter that was like, hey, we're going to be a dumpster fire for a little bit, hang on, you know, hang on with us. And the fans were like, okay, we are on board, let's do this together. They were honest, and because of that, you know, I feel like a lot of fans went on board off the rip because of that transparency. It wasn't you know, oh, we're going to try our best to get there anyway type of mentality, and then, you know, say that to your face and then behind your back trade everybody. Like that wasn't what they were doing. They were honest, and I feel like the fans appreciated that. And I feel like honesty goes a long way with any fan base really, but especially a fan base like the Rangers, because people are going to come either way. So
No
the
matter what.
fact so the fact that, there's this sense of, oh, we have to not tell the whole truth to the fans or else they won't come. I don't vibe with that, because the Rangers were terrible and there was still packed, MSG for the vast majority of that time.
I want to wrap up by trying to articulate this in a way that makes sense, because I know there are a lot of people who don't have the time, who they just watch the games and that's it. They might engage with the podcast, they might read a little bit, but they're not poring over the data, they're not watching the tape. The vast majority of people, the only consumption they have is just watching the game, what they hear on the intermissions, the pre and the post game. The Rangers are a very talented hockey team.
Yep.
No one is arguing that they don't have talent. The problem is the way they play, the style of hockey they like to maintain. It is difficult to replicate, and it becomes a challenge when you don't have favorable game situations. What do I mean by that? The Rangers are a significantly better team when they are playing with a lead because they're an opportunistic team. That means their defense doesn't have to play as much defense because the other team is desperate. When the other team is desperate, when they start pinching their D closer and closer to the net in the offensive zone, when they start settling for lower quality chances, that's where the Rangers make their money. When they can get the puck to their skill players in transition, get the puck moving laterally, moving the goalie around, forcing the other team to play defense. That's where the Rangers are at their best. And people will watch the way they play and say, well, they're winning more often than not. What are you so worried about? This is the quintessential New York Rangers experience. This is what it has always has been. That when they are in an environment where they can trade chances back and forth and it's sloppy like it was against Detroit, that's fine. Detroit's only good defenseman is Mo Seider, and he has to play with Ben Sherratt. So it balances out. It is easy to target Detroit's defense and make them make plays. When you play Buffalo, and Buffalo is not a good record team, they are a talented team. They stomped you. That happened last year too when they played Buffalo. I was at the game. Buffalo
Yeah.
beat them 5-1. Where you give teams with a lot of skill, you let that team with a lot of skill get up 1-0 or 2-0. Then you start forcing those extra long passes. You start getting desperate. That's where they pick you apart. The Rangers are really good at doing that to bad teams. It's a lot harder to do that against good teams. And right now, it feels like the Rangers are in this state of, we know we are good enough to make the playoffs. We need to get there. Let's try and figure some things out. And that's why I think you're still going to see these stubborn line combinations and these stubborn defensive pairs. But my hope, and I have no way of knowing this, my hope is that if this continues for another 2-3 games, Winnipeg is a good bellwether because Winnipeg is a very good defensive team. They feature very skilled players in Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers. It's a good bellwether. But if we do another 2 or 3 games of this, we need to go back to the forwards and the pairs from the first 8 games that were working very well. And we will figure out the bad ones. We will figure out what we can do with Zibanejad. We will figure out what we can do with Ryan Lindgren. Because right now, it feels like we're trying to prove a point. We're trying to artificially prove a point that, well, Ryan Lindgren's been here. He knows what it takes. Well, if he's not playing well, it doesn't really matter what he did 3 years ago. If
Yeah.
if he's struggling, he's struggling. Why are we forcing a guy to come back sooner rather than later?
In November.
I know Laviolette said in his comment, well, he's still getting used to playing with the fishbowl. Then why is he playing?
Yeah.
If he's not comfortable enough with his peripheral vision in the fishbowl, he shouldn't be playing.
Right.
And I know people will say, well, he's a warrior. He wants to be there for his team. It's the same thing with the Shea Weber thing over the weekend where he said, well, I covered my entire body head to toe in athletic tape so I could play. Shea Weber hasn't played professional hockey since that playoff run. And people will say, well, he had career-threatening injuries already. He figured, why not push all the chips in and go for it? Well, because you have to live the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine Shea Weber feels pretty good on a day-to-day basis, but you play with broken bones, torn ligaments, torn what's the other tendons. You play with a banged up body your body doesn't recover from that trauma. You get older. Shea Weber's 39 right now. Would he still be playing if he had just gotten surgery and shut it down that year? It's possible, he could have been playing at 39, but that's not the point. The point is that these are still people. And when Lindgren goes out there and we commend him for playing compromised and because he cares so much, we are creating a bad instance. We are telling him it is more important for you to play hockey than for you to feel okay. And that's where you end up with guys who flush years of their career away because they're rushing it. Ryan Lindgren doesn't seem like the guy who's going to be able to play till he's 43 years old. I'm
No,
just going to go
no,
out on a
no,
limb and say he's not going to have the Zdeno Chara career arc.
no.
He just doesn't.
Well, and the thing too is people say, "Oh, he wants to play, he wants to get out there." I don't care. And I
Where's
don't
your
know
responsibility?
I don't know why the Rangers should care if he wants to play or not. If he has to play in a fishbowl, and then your reasoning as to why he's playing miserably bad is because he's in a fishbowl, then he shouldn't have been then you shouldn't be playing in November. That's such a I don't understand why this bears need for explanation. If you are a professional player and it's November and you have 65 games left in the season and you can sit out another week or 10 days in order for you to get a lot closer to 100% and not need the fishbowl, why are you forcing it?
Especially when the team was playing well.
Exactly. Like they're not, if it'd be one thing if the team was like 0-9 and you were like, okay, well, I have to get out there.
It's very different that Connor McDavid rushed back from his
Right,
ankle injury for the Oilers, who were sitting at 5-6-1 when he came back.
Like
than Ryan Lindgren.
The fact that the argument for having Ryan Lindgren back in the lineup when he's not 100% healthy is he wants to be out there is the biggest joke I have heard in a long time because it doesn't matter what he wants. We're talking about a team in November that needs like if Ryan Lindgren if the Rangers are set on playing Ryan Lindgren all these minutes, then they need him healthy. Like bar none. Brian Lindgren is a better player, or any player is better healthy than not healthy. Why are you rushing this man back? Now he has to play with the fishbowl, and now you have to make up excuses for him why he's not playing well when the team was playing well before you rushed him back. This doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like we're watching. I don't know if you're a Parks and Rec fan, Nick, but I've watched Parks and Rec the show a couple of times, and a lot of it's a parody of the ridiculousness of society, right? Of what is the absolute most insane conclusion people can reach and people can, make off of situations. And that's what always happens in that show. This is one of those times where it's like, you don't have to play the guy who's forced to be in a fishbowl. It's November. The guys that you had before were playing better than what they are doing now. Why is he there? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we like, this is crazy. I feel like I'm crazy.
Well, I mean, we have experience with this. That's why, we did this last decade with Mark Stahl and Dan Girardi, where the team would tell us they were fine, that they were dedicated, that they epitomized what it meant to be a Ranger. They're remembered fondly, but part of the reason they didn't win last decade is they hung on too long to those guys. And instead of trying to ease the landing and try and find a way to go right back up, they had to eat it on the chin for 2 straight years because of them clinging on to guys who were maybe not ready. And look, there's a lot of time left in this season. I am not ready to pronounce anything big picture, but I am a little concerned. I'm not going to say I'm worried, but this feels a lot more like 2 years ago than it does last year. Last year they came out of the gate, 19-3-1, 19-4-1, and it looked good too while they were doing it. They were winning. They were winning big against bad teams. They were finding ways. The power play was absolutely humming. But right now, it feels like we're doing the empty calorie version. We're going to beat a bunch of bad teams. The alert's going to go off all year about, well, they're not that good at 5-on-5. Their power play looks not as good as it has the last few years, but I imagine with more sample, that'll straighten itself out. The kill is okay. It's not as good as it was last year, but it's doing okay. Shesterkin is playing out of his mind. Quick has been very good in his starts. I know Quick was first off at practice today, so I imagine
Yeah.
he's going to start again against Winnipeg. I got to go and look at the data and see if the team plays better in front of Quick than they do in front of Shesterkin, because I know that was the case for a lot of Lundqvist prime, where the backup would get actual defense, whereas Lundqvist was, well, Hank's got it, and that was the defensive message for 8 years. But
Yeah. It'll be really funny, by the way, when the Rangers beat the Jets tomorrow. It'll be peak Rangers content when, they lose to terrible teams that they shouldn't have, any reasoning to play that way, slash, playing really poorly against bad teams and still finding ways to win because they're just better. And then the Winnipeg Jets, who are 14-1 on the season, by the way, who are just tearing apart the entire league, can't lose to anybody. They're destroying the best teams, the worst teams, you name it. They're winning against against these teams. It'd be really funny if the Rangers played the way they did against Buffalo and Detroit, and then showed up against Winnipeg and actually beat them. That'd be so funny.
it's not out of the question. I mean, that's the Rangers' MO, is inexplicable, is doing the inexplicable, because when you are as talented as they are, you get a little too self-confident. You start doing things you probably shouldn't do. And there is an element of hubris to this competitiveness that makes it compelling. That, well, we know we're good, so we're gonna fuck around and we're gonna see how good we actually are. And it creates this, well, we'll figure it out. And I want to wrap up on this note, because I do think it's important. They do have a lot of games left, but that clock is ticking.
Yep.
When you say, well, we got time, we'll figure it out, that clock is constantly ticking in the background. You don't get to add more games to the schedule if you need more time to figure it out. If you have a semester long project and your semester's 12 or 13 weeks, 13 weeks is a long time. 2 weeks is not a long time. And the Rangers right now feel like they are in the, well, I've got plenty of time. I'll go out on a Wednesday. Sure. I'll get to this project eventually. It'll get done. I know I can do it. And that creates a culture of permissivity where you feel like you can get away with it, so you keep pushing. Well, if I can go out on a Wednesday, I can go out on a Tuesday too. I don't need to go to lecture this week. I'm gonna stay up. I'm gonna play Fortnite. I'm not going to class. Why would I do that? That's what happens when you let bad habits
Tells you how
form.
old Nick is, by the way. We're still playing Fortnite.
Well, season one of Fortnite, I was still in
Yeah,
college.
that's right.
Finding out Fortnite season one is older than the Rizzler maybe made me feel like I needed to go into the grave. I've never
Uh,
felt more old in my
that's
life.
the most terminally online sentence I think you've ever said.
At least on this show, I've definitely said more terminally online things. But yeah, no, Fortnite season one was a long time ago. But when you keep telling yourself, I have plenty of time, I have plenty of time, that clock doesn't stop ticking. And there's this old head saying that I really do appreciate, even if it is kind of fortune cookie wisdom, that life is what happens while you're waiting for something to happen. And that kind of feels like what the Rangers season is on course to be. That we're going to keep saying they're a good team. They're going to keep beating the teams they're supposed to. We're going to keep waiting for them to put it all together, where they're going to get the special teams going, they're going to get the transition play going, and they're going to look good while doing it. And maybe they do, maybe they don't, but waiting for that to happen as opposed to actively taking steps to make it happen, that feels like it's going to be the story of the season right now.
At a certain point, you've run the experiment 100 times. I hate to break it to you, but running it back 101 times isn't going to magically give you a different result.
Nope.
Unless you decide, okay, we're going to change X, Y, and Z and then see what happens and see if that's six. I mean, in some part, you did do that for a few games. It worked really well. And then you went back to the things that don't work for reasons. I wish I had an answer for that. I don't. That'd be one thing that I would love to ask Peter Laviolette about, but I don't have a credential to ask him. So at a certain point, if you do an experiment and you know that something works, that you choosing to essentially ignore the results of that experiment and go back to your tried and true is only going to carry you so much. And Detroit, you're probably not meeting Detroit in the playoffs. You're probably not meeting Montreal in the playoffs. You're not meeting these teams that you can, mail in and beat. You're going to have to play Florida. You're going to have to play New Jersey or Carolina or one of these really good teams. I don't like it. All of these wins are great. Winning against, getting trashed against Buffalo was embarrassing, but all of these wins in the regular season are great, and they sell tickets. But at the end of the day, if you want to win the Stanley Cup, you have to play like you want to win the Stanley Cup, and you have to coach like you want to win a Stanley Cup. And so far, I haven't seen that.
They have opportunity. It is all in front of them. It is incumbent upon them to seize that opportunity because at a certain point, that opportunity is not going to be there. You miss your shot. That's it. And as much as people want to do they'll be back. The Thunder thought they were going to be back. It took 13 years, but the Thunder are finally back. It takes a while. And the Rangers didn't have to bottom out as badly as, say, the Sharks or the Blackhawks for as long as they did. But this party is not going on indefinitely. And everyone will say, well, they're the Rangers. They can get anyone they want. I'm still waiting for Jack Eichel.
Yeah.
Still waiting for
It's a
first
terrible
line right
mindset.
wing.
The mindset's awful. Where again, you're relying on outside sources to feed you to spoon feed you talent instead of actually trying to figure out yourself how to maximize your talent and get and inject more your way and to build a Stanley Cup contender through the team that you have. But now again, you have to rely on external factors and people wanting to come here because it's New York, because it's a machine,
Hey,
instead
bro,
of
even if you care about that, they'll get you rid of your ass. Kevin
yeah,
Shattenkirk said this was a lifelong dream. They let him play with a torn meniscus and bought him out after one season.
yep.
Shows to show how much they give a shit about that. It's all a myth. I mean, at a certain point, you got to recognize the Rangers or the Mets or the Jets, but they act like the Yankees. At a certain point, you got to accept that.
It's true. The Rangers have won cup since World War II, and
America entered World War II because the
since
sticklers.
America, yes,
Yeah.
sure. Islanders fans make fun of us for that. Devils fans make fun of us for that, and us as Rangers fans, we get defensive, but it's true. Like a lot of Rangers fans and their organization will walk around like, oh, we're the Rangers, we're the best franchise around. Okay, but you haven't won anything. You
Nope.
won a bunch of games in January, and that's what you're hanging your caps on. Is you winning a bunch of? You have a banner that says you won a bunch of regular season games. That's your
Regular
claim
season
to fame.
champs.
Regular season champs, baby. Woo! Okay. Did you plan a parade for that? Where was the parade? Where was the parade? Where's the hardware? Oh! I'm just here. I'm just getting word. There wasn't a parade. Oh, there is no hardware for winning the regular season. Oh, that's right. Well, there's always next year. Am I right?
I've been saying that for a long time, Andrew. At a certain point, you start getting worked over. It's like being a wrestling fan. At a certain point, the bad guy's gonna get his comeuppance. That's the way wrestling works. It's the same thing here. Eventually, the Rangers hit the wall. I am not getting my hopes up. I hope they don't put a third NHL franchise in Florida because that's another team we won't beat in the conference final.
Be funny though. I mean, bet with Bettman's NHL, you never know. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it'd be funny if it did.
The Daytona Beach whatevers are gonna have the Rangers in hell in a 2030 something conference.
It'd be really funny because then the Rangers would just have another team that they couldn't possibly fathom of beating in the conference finals.
Yeah. All right. That'll do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. Enough with the moping. We'll talk to you guys next week. If you could be so kind, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We will talk to you guys next week.
Later.